Hello Year 12. I'm going to briefly be introducing some of the various post-18 options for you today, which is really designed to help you get started with your own research and just really starting to have a think about where you might be looking to apply come the start of Year 13. Obviously at the moment we don't know what the situation with applications next year will entirely look like, and we will be keeping you posted, and we'll also be looking to go into a lot more detail on these various areas over the next few weeks. So starting with university, for me, I think the real benefit of going to university is to study something that you're very passionate about in detail. I often get a lot of people expressing concern that they might not be quite as prepared for the job market. I don't think this is true. I think you'll find that the skills that graduates do develop at university are very, very desirable for employers. And what you'll also find is that you don't necessarily need to worry about what subject you're studying. The majority of graduate professions actually don't mind what degree you've studied. It's just the fact that you have a degree and you have that set of transferable skills that they're really interested in. Obviously, there are some careers that need you to do a degree, things like medicine, teaching, veterinary science. So if you know that you want to go into one of those particular areas, then university will be the route for you. There are different ways of progressing to university, so it might well be that you choose to go straight onto the traditional 3-year undergraduate course. You might look at perhaps a foundation entry route, which is designed to bridge that gap between A-level and a degree subject, perhaps looking at further specialist areas. Or it might well be that if you know you want to study something in depth or to a certain level, you can actually apply for 4-year courses that include postgraduate study to start after the sixth form. Again, a lot of people's vision of university tends to be that moving away, living in student halls, and if that's what you want to do, it's a fantastic opportunity, but you don't have to. You can also study from home, and there are lots of options now with our fantastic range of local universities, but also in terms of distance learning that will allow you to do that. Things you maybe didn't know about university. A lot of people, as I said before, are worried about the employment skills at the end of a degree, but actually there are a lot of different ways that you can combine gaining those employment skills with a normal degree. So for example, you can take a sandwich year, which is where you essentially have a year out in the middle where you go and do some time in industry. Placement years, where you might have times throughout the different academic years where you'll go out and obviously spend some time in industry. Internships, where you spend your summer doing work experience, or degree apprenticeships, which we'll talk about a little bit when we look at other types of apprenticeship as well. And these are all ways that you can make sure that you are getting really important industry time and developing those employability skills, as well as studying for a subject that you're really interested in. Student loans, hopefully you all were aware that student loans existed and that they will cover your tuition fees, and also there will be support there with your living costs. I think you should rightly look into the cost of university and what that means for you, but I would urge you not to let it put you off your decision. Yes, you do leave with what you might call student debt, but actually the way that that is repaid is very, very manageable. You don't pay anything back until you're earning over a certain threshold. That's quite a decent wage. It comes off a little bit at a time off your pay slip, so actually pre-tax, along with your tax, along with your NI, and it doesn't have an impact on things like getting a mortgage, buying a car, your credit rating. So it isn't necessarily something to be worried about, although it is something to be aware of. You can also study for a degree part-time and at home, as I mentioned before, rather than actually going to university. So again, if it's moving away from home, or you think you might combine your studies with other things like working, that's a really good option, and you can explore things like the Open University or other distance learning courses that universities provide. So what are some of the main pros and cons for university? As I mentioned, it's required for certain careers, and if you know what your career choice is, that is something that you should be researching, whether a degree is actually necessary to progress in that career. This is a big one that I always say to students. It's essentially a halfway house to that independent living, to becoming a grown-up. At university, you will do things like managing your own time, perhaps paying some bills, living away from home, but you'll do it in a very safe and supported environment. If you make mistakes, there's generally always someone there to help you rectify them. And that can be really reassuring. It's not quite taking that full step into adulthood. It's an opportunity to live away from home. So some people want to, some people can't wait, some people are keen to stay a little bit closer. But either way, the chances there, it's an affordable and supported way to move away and have a little bit of time and independence. Kind of exploring what it's like to live on your own, and even travel. Again, I mentioned sandwich years before, but you can also take a year in your degree to go and study in another country, and that could be an amazing opportunity. University clubs, societies and sports teams are not only fantastic fun, they're also another way of developing further employability skills, and you have plenty of time at university to explore these things. It's a really good way to take up something new, to try out something, or to maybe do something that you've always wanted to do. And again, really, really good skills development at the same time. Potentially increased earning potential. I'm going to say this with a pinch of salt because there are different statistics that you can look at that would suggest that graduates earn higher over their lifetime, but potentially you are gaining access to higher paid jobs. And again, if you know what career you have in mind, you can look into that a little bit. The cons, student loan repayments, as I mentioned before, for a few years you are going to be looking at perhaps a slightly reduced income because you will be paying those off. It doesn't guarantee higher earnings, as I've just said. It is something that you do need to just look into and take with a pinch of salt. You do need to be committed for at least 3 years or the full length of time of your degree, so you need to choose something that you're not going to get bored with. You may lack employment skills on graduating, although if you've done some of the things that I've just mentioned, hopefully you won't. Okay, moving on to apprenticeships, which I think is the other kind of big option that students often want to find out more about. Hopefully you're aware that an apprenticeship is where you work, but you're also completing a qualification alongside that. So generally being employed by a company, and you will also be doing your qualification either through that company or through a separate training provider. There are 3 levels of apprenticeship that you will most likely be looking at. The first is an advanced or a level 3 qualification, and you can also do your maths and English functional skills alongside that if required. This is the same level as A-level or the BTECs that you might be studying currently. So essentially it is a little bit of a step sideways, but there's nothing wrong with that if you're wanting to do something that is new to you. And they'll be looking at your GCSE grades rather than your A-level grades. Higher apprenticeships are level 4 and above, so this is looking at the level leading on from A-levels and BTECs that you're currently studying, and it also includes foundation degrees that you might be able to do alongside your work placement. Again, they'll be looking at your A-level grades this time, so that might be expressed in UCAS points, or it might just be expressed in grades, or they might just specify certain subjects or that you have A-levels, or you might progress from an advanced apprenticeship onto a higher apprenticeship. And finally, degree apprenticeships. This is where the nationally recognised qualification that you do as part of your apprenticeship is a degree, and will be done through a university. That might either be blocks of study where you go to the university and spend some time as a student, or it might be through some sort of distance learning. And again, you can either progress onto that from a previous apprenticeship, or they'll be looking at your A-levels. Things you maybe didn't know, there is a national minimum wage for apprentices, which is £4.15 an hour. You will notice that that is lower than the national minimum wage for your age. That's because they're taking into account that your training is being paid for, so they don't have to pay a national minimum wage. However, many companies will pay more than this, especially if you're looking at the higher and degree apprenticeships. There are different ways to complete your qualification, so it doesn't necessarily have to be that you spend 1 day out a week at college. That's how some apprenticeships do it, but it might well be that you study in blocks, as I mentioned before with the degree apprenticeships, or that your learning is entirely done in the workplace as you go. 65% of apprenticeships stay with the company that they trained with, so that is a really good rate of students that are offered and accept jobs with the employer that they actually train with. So it's a really good way to guarantee yourself a job in a few years' time. Those that don't, a large percentage of those are because they choose not to, not necessarily because they're not offered the job, still have a fantastic set of transferable skills to go on and apply to other jobs with, or in fact to move on to university if that's what they choose to do. So the pros of apprenticeships are earning while you learn, although please be aware that you're not likely to be learning huge amounts to begin with. So you might like to think about where you're going to live. You might well still need to live at home and factor in other costs. there is great lifetime earning potential from an apprenticeship because you started out with those skills showing that you could learn and study. You do have good progression options and good opportunities to progress into higher kind of salary bands in the future. Straight out of university, you are gaining amazing skills, confidence, and increased responsibility. So it's kind of the opposite of what I was saying about university before. Actually, this is a really good way to live in that adult world, to start kind of making your mark, to go out there and not be a student anymore. They're in a really wide range of industries, so there's something out there to suit everybody, and on completion you have a nationally recognised qualification as well as transferable skills to take forward. You do need to factor into costs like transport, uniform and rent. As I said before, you will be earning but not loads, so these costs are something you've got to balance up against that. It can be a shock to the system. It is a different way of being than you've perhaps been used to at school, and some people aren't ready for this. So if you don't think you're quite ready for that strict working routine yet, then perhaps you might like to look at something else. You could be working harder than your university friends, so potentially you're going to have to be managing your budget a little bit more, maybe not able to go out quite so much. So that's something you're going to have to think about, is that lifestyle. Not to say that apprentices don't have any fun, because of course they do. Not all apprenticeships that exist are available locally, so you do have to have a look at the local labour market information for our area. What is the currently demands for in our area, because it won't be every area of apprenticeship that exists. A lot of effort needs to go into searching and applying for vacancies. I'm going to really stress this now. It's not like UCAS where you make one application and that's you done. You will need to be continuously searching, applying, practicing your interview skills, touching up your CV and working on application questions. So it isn't a quick one-stop thing. It's going to be a good amount of effort over the coming year. School leaver schemes, I'm just going to mention these quickly. They're very, very similar to higher apprenticeships, but you might see them advertised slightly differently. And that's because it will be where a company has developed their own in-house training scheme. They're not necessarily following a nationally recognised qualification. It's a great opportunity to get experience in lots of different areas of a company, but they are competitive. They do ask for high grades. And again, it's a lengthy recruitment process, often involving an application form, an interview, potentially an assessment centre. There might be online interviews and face-to-face interviews, so you have to be prepared that application scheme could last you some time. I'm going to continue on with the rest of my areas in a separate video, so please have a little click on that link once you've had a little think about this one to see the other options.